I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: why do I get so annoyed by the poverty argument for abortion? And this is basically the idea that some people have that poverty is a justification for abortion. Whenever I hear this argument, and I heard it again recently, which is why I'm talking about it today, I like to tell people about my family upbringing. I grew up in a working class family, but before I had finished primary school, my father was invalided out of work with a very, very serious health issue that prevented him from ever holding down full-time work ever again for the rest of his adult life. That meant that we went from being a working class family to a welfare class family. We relied on the sickness benefit, which is a state-funded form of welfare in my country, and that's what it was that kept our family alive and kept us going. So, there were times when we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. There was another episode where my father went and pawned one of his most beloved items and to an unscrupulous pawnbroker who did not give him what it was worth, in order that we could just afford the basics of Christmas in our family. This was after I'd left home. We never had big flashy Christmases, but just the basics for Christmas. So this was my experience. And in the midst of that family experience, my mother and father got pregnant twice more. My two youngest brothers were born a couple of years apart. But not once did my parents ever contemplate abortion as a solution to that particular issue. My parents, in fact, were so strong that at one point, I don't know if it happened twice, but at least once, with one of my younger brothers, the doctor that my mother was dealing with had actually suggested to her that abortion could be a good idea, and she flat out refused. Now, we're all really glad that she did that, and I think particularly my younger brother, who was being discussed and talked about by that doctor, is pretty glad that my mother was as strong as she was. But I guess the point is this, that poverty doesn't make you all of a sudden forget, I guess, the morals that you are grounded in, the moral norms which govern your life. My mother and my father were in a situation where things were financially difficult, but they did, I think, what good people do in those situations, and they say, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out a way. They never contemplated going down the road of abortion. I think also it gives us an excuse, and this is another thing that really frustrates me about this argument. I think it gives us a societal excuse not to really sort of care too much about people in those situations. We get to sort of wash our hands of the whole matter and sort of say, well, here you go, here's a fix, have an abortion, that'll solve the problem. But it's not really addressing much of an issue there at all. The other thing is, when you look at the situation of who it is that's using abortion, you'd have to say that it's not really a lot of people who are using it for reasons of poverty anymore. You go back 20, 30, 40 years in my country, and people didn't have the same level of financial stability and wealth that they have today, yet there was far less abortion than what we have today. When you look at the research, it's kind of interesting. What it actually seems to indicate is that it's not really financial factors that are the primary driver. Instead, it's more nuanced and complex than that. Obviously, your beliefs, your moral compass that sort of governs your life is going to be a factor. Secondly, and this is really important, is the level of community that you have around you. If you feel that you are totally on your own and that no one is going to be walking with you through this journey, then you're more likely to go down the path of abortion than if you have support around you. And interestingly, it seems that the most important factor of support in the life of the mother of a child is actually the father of that child. And if the father of that child fails to show support, or is even actively hostile to the idea of that child being allowed to be born and to live the fullness of life, as I think all of us are entitled to, then it's more likely than not, then that child will lose its life in an abortion clinic, and that really isn't a good thing. Now, I guess the vile irony in all of this is the way in which militant pro-choice feminism has really tried to sell society, and I think effectively has done that for large portions of society over the last couple of decades, tried to sell them this idea that this whole question of abortion has nothing to do with men. All of a sudden, they're the silent, forgotten factor in all of this, the father of the child, because of course, it's about nothing more than a woman and her choices. Now, if you tell that to your society for long enough, like we have done now over successive decades, then don't be surprised if you all of a sudden discover that a lot of males, or a large and growing group of males, are becoming more hostile to the idea of even being fathers or taking responsibility for fatherhood, or even thinking that they should step up and show support, because otherwise, to step up and show support might be interfering in some way because of this ideology that they've been schooled under. And here's the thing, we know that fatherlessness, a lack of fatherly involvement, is one of the big drivers for poverty in our societies. If your dad is present in the family home, there's a greater chance that you're going to be more financially stable in that household. You're certainly more advantaged if you've got a mum and a dad present when it comes to earning income. And yet this very ideology that lies at the heart of this pro-choice movement is very much focused on excluding fathers, on stripping the whole idea of childbirth and pregnancy and bringing new life into the world out of its communal context, male and female community together, and just reducing it to one solitary individual and the decisions that they make. Now, this obviously excludes the unborn human being and any consideration for their well-being, but it also fosters an environment in your society which is actually helping to perpetuate a whole lot of serious social issues. It's not really dealing with anything. It just gives us, I think, a convenient excuse for not getting involved. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal or Patreon. There is a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.